Just wait for that notification. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for this On Point special, talking about Microsoft Defender for Business. And putting this together, what I thought was really important was to talk about what makes this different to any other sort of like product launch, and what the opportunity is for you as partners to grow your business, because that's what our focus is at Ticketdata, is helping you grow your business. So I'm going to go through Microsoft's piece and also our input into it as well, from what we're sort of like seeing in the New Zealand market. So without further ado, let's jump into it. And why is it important to you as a partner to look at this way of doing security? And it's a move into it's modernizing endpoints and modernizing security for endpoints. Securing endpoints extended, if you like. I played with that as an acronym, but decided against it because we are recording this, and my Microsoft people might jump up and down if I go with that abbreviation. But you as a partner need to look at ways that you can provide a new service or extend a service while lowering your cost of doing business. Any solution that costs you money, you've got to charge a lot for, and then it's very hard to actually push that out into market. Also give you some opportunity for other revenue streams. Why just put it at endpoint security? What else can we do around that endpoint security conversation? What other offerings can we have to grow our revenue, grow our IP, and our ability as a partner to become known as that capable, experienced, technical, safe hands for our businesses and our SMB businesses? Mum and dad pop store, maybe a plumber or a carpentry place of work. They don't know IT. They're trusting in you to bring up these sort of like conversations. It's important to the customer because the threats and risks have changed from the old days of legacy security or endpoint security, or antivirus, if you like. The writing was on the wall 5 years ago. Unfortunately, the conversation that we've had with our customers hasn't really significantly changed. It's still that approach of selling insurance. You've got to have an AV, but no, you need something more than an AV now. And something that we can take away from the last 2.5 years is that businesses are contemplating resilience. How do I get my business back up and running? It's something that they're aware of, and as we'll see from stats later on, it is something they're acutely looking at partners to have that conversation with them. They need to be adaptable and prepare for the unknown, basically. We didn't see COVID coming, but we rapidly adapted to the hybrid way of working from home, getting our businesses up and running. Now businesses are screaming out and saying, hey, look, I need to be prepared just in case something happens in the future. How do I future-proof my business for that? And you need to differentiate from the other partners out there. Show what the added value is. We're all selling the same Microsoft licenses, Business Premium, Standard, Basic. How is your offering different to the guy down the road? What value can you deliver to your customer? The question always comes up, why should I trust Microsoft for security? And Microsoft have a different interpretation of this to what I'm going to give you, but 25 million signals a day, that's a no-brainer. We see so much signal going through Exchange Online, so for protecting emails, why would you go with anybody else? If there's a phishing email or malware in email out there, we're going to see it first. Sure, we share all that signal with every other security vendor out there, but we are the source of all that signal. So why have something sitting in front of it? Massive growth in 2020. So why is that important? To you as a partner, I've been involved with security vendors before, and a lot of them have sort of like fallen over. Microsoft is not going to fall over. We're looking at over $10 billion worth of revenue. It's the largest business unit within Microsoft, and you think about how fast that's growing. To put that in perspective, if you look at the size of Microsoft's security business, it's 10 times bigger than the next biggest dedicated security vendor. So we're here for the long run. It's not going to go away. You can, invest in Microsoft security because it's an important part of the business. We're not going to decide tomorrow that we're not going to do security anymore. It is huge for us. The other thing is that we view security as not just endpoint security. It's across everything. So, the new first wave is around identity. That's the perimeter of cloud, if you like, is all around identity. So how do we manage that? Most people authenticate through Azure Active Directory. What other security vendor has access into who's trying to log into there, and what we can do is as far as hardening an environment or protecting that identity. And we come back to that zero trust, verify. Number of threats that we blocked, and a lot of these things are wide-ranging malware or threats that haven't hit the headlines. We're all familiar with NotPetya, WannaCry, all those sort of things. The number of those sort of threats that Microsoft has blocked at source by taking down command and control servers is astronomical. They just don't make the headlines. So to say 6 billion threats, it's a lot more than that, because we're counting that as one single threat. If we sort of like look at NotPetya, which was worldwide and took down Maersk and large organizations as well as small business, if we counted those as separate threats to those businesses, it would be a lot more than that. Management, dedicated team at Microsoft, which is cross-discipline. The people that make up security at Microsoft come from a wide range of backgrounds, which is really important. We go on about diversity, but we have people from all race, religion, culture, disciplines, psychology, mathematics, artificial intelligence. So they get a full view and bring all those resources together in it. And something that we need to be aware of is the mounting government regulations around who government will do business with, what are the regulations within the country, and that's why we have compliance as part of our security offering. But let's come back to having that endpoint security conversation. And my colleague in Australia just did a great article on the time is now to have that security conversation. I would argue that the time has always been now, and it's not a security conversation, it's an IT conversation. Whatever you're doing with a partner, as far as offering your services, security should be front and center of that conversation. And it is a difficult conversation for a customer to bring up. I'm worried about my security. Well, what are you worried about? It can be sort of awkward, and this brings back to my abbreviation that I was going to use. It is much better that you have that conversation rather than getting it secondhand or looking at the news media. For example, there was a article on the news last night that sort of like was glaring that employees are monitoring their workers at home, and they're saying that 80% of people are doing that. I would say that's absolute rubbish, but good starting point to say, hey, look, did you see that on the news last night? I accept that you're not doing it, but your employees are worried that they're being monitored, whether that's by you or by somebody else. What security have you got in place around it? But we'll come to some objections and the rest of it. So these are the stats that Microsoft will trot out. 90% of SMBs are paying for an AV. Unfortunately, 10% are using free AVs, but everyone's got an AV on the endpoint. What customers don't realize is that is probably pretty useless. All vendors will make a big issue of being cross-platform, and so is Microsoft. So Defender for Business in this case that we're talking about, across Windows and your mobile platforms as well as Macs. What we also have for a partner sort of like level, and we're not going to dwell too much on it, is Microsoft 365 Lighthouse, which gives you that multi-tenanted approach to managing this, and also having it integrated with how you manage their Office 365. It's all in the same portal, all at hand, rather than having multiple portals. But we'll talk more about lowering that cost of doing business by reducing the number of vendors that you have to deal with and do certifications for, and all the rest of it. That is a cost of business. The thing that's really worrying is that 90% of customers say they'd switch IT partners if they offered better security. So that's a really compelling stat to show that customers are thinking about this. They might have brought up the conversation with you, but I bet you they're out web searching for security solutions. Front it, get out there and start talking to them and saying, hey, look, this is something that Microsoft have got. We're offering it as the service. It's going to replace your current AV, and it's going to give you so much more breadth and depth. We're going to go through the unboxing. This is basically just showing the wizard, because I know as partners, the biggest barrier for you to change is often, I don't have resource, I don't have time, I've got to learn this thing, this is something new. Yeah, sure, but it's easy. You don't need to have security qualified people for it. And big shout out to Computer Networks down in Nelson. Guys are certified on this and have seen the worth of going down the Defender for Business around the business premium packages. But what does it look like? So as soon as you install it on a clean client, or you've got a third-party AV out there, it doesn't really matter. Just remember that this is not installing agents on endpoints. This is basically just what we call onboarding, connecting the signal from the operating system back into our portal so we can monitor it for advanced threats. So it's basically click on the get started. If you don't see that wizard, go to security.microsoft.com, bring up your security portal, which you should all be familiar with, click on endpoint security, and go from there. It then sort of like says, how do you want to onboard these? Do it manually or automatic? If you've got some Intune policies there, they may conflict if you've already rolled out Intune. Choose a method to onboard, so we can do that automatically, or we can do scripts locally, or we can push it out through group policy, whatever your configuration is. So it's totally flexible on how we get these onboarded. And you don't have to be a security MS500 certified person to do this. Your normal help desk guys can do this, as long as they've got admin privileges onto that tenant. Then we walk through configuring the security settings. So there is a range of baseline security settings that you can push out. So from go, getting these guys onboarded, the security is already done for you. All those sort of things where everyone asks, what are the top 5 things that I need to do? All built into Defender for Business. So you can baseline it, then onboard it into Lighthouse, and you can push those out, push out different baselines to different customers or groups of customers. Select the devices to configure, so it will go through and tell you which ones you can actually onboard. From there, and you're almost done, click, and you're all set. As easy as that. If you want to do some later, if you want to do mobile devices, once again, back to the security portal, settings, onboarding, and you can sort of like choose the OS. So Google Play Store, obviously, because we've got to install an agent on there, you'll need to go to Google Play Store and download that, and the same for iOS. So how, as a partner, do I make money from this? Simple, by providing a service. Take it beyond what you're currently doing with an AV. There, it's basically set and forget. I doubt that people even report back what value that is providing to a customer. But what we could do is extend Defender for Business by offering things around web filtering. You may have another appliance in there that's doing web filtering for you. You can now do that with your Defender for Business, or Defender for Endpoint. Forgive me if I keep on going back to Endpoint, but same thing, the advanced threat protection piece. Application and device inventory. So first place that you start in security 101 is have a inventory of what you have in your environment. That's devices and applications. Defender for Business will give you that. Go to click what's my inventory, and it will show you all the software that's available in there, all the devices that are in your environment, whether they're onboarded or not. You can even do network scanning within that customer tenant and look for the IoT devices, infrastructure switches, APs, all coming up within that same portal. And you're getting all this with Defender for Business. And then reporting back, Secure Score is a great place to start. It gives the customer a view of their security posture against like businesses, and also gives you recommendations for the next steps that you need to sort of take. We make money out of it by also reducing the cost of doing business. So start with Lighthouse. How can I manage multiple tenants with limited resources and have a consistent security posture across all those tenants? How do I tailor make it for my legal customers, for my accountancy, my sales, my plumber, my carpentry guy? Look at consolidating vendors, because that's a soft cost to you. The more vendors that you have to deal with, the more your costs go up. Automate as much as possible. So the detection and response is automated. Things will happen and it'll just be highlighted to say, hey, look, we stopped Joe Blogs from clicking on this. And standardization. Excuse the spelling there, but my dictionary for some reason is American. The more that we standardize, the less bespoke offerings we have, and there's a cost on doing bespoke offerings for every customer. Every customer likes to think they're individual, but what we can do is roll out templates, if you like, and that's what Lighthouse and Defender for Business will do. And integration. How does security posture, how is it enhanced by having integration across everything? So we talked about Azure Active Directory. How does your endpoint security integrate with Azure Active Directory? And with Defender for Business, of course, it does. If we take a case scenario, if you're talking to a customer and say, well, what happens if Jane at reception clicks on a link, gives away her credentials in an email? We have no email security. So she managed to do that. Next thing, those credentials are going to be played against her tenant. Someone's going to try and log in as her. Would your standard antivirus actually pick that up? No, because it doesn't have any integration with Azure Active Directory or through your email. So customer objections, I'm going to give you Microsoft's and then my response. I know from previous roles at security that this is a hard sell, and I'm familiar with the way that vendors usually do this, and in the New Zealand market it doesn't usually work. It is not an insurance sales. It's not scare the hell out of your customers. That never works for us. So I think a lot of these objections you can get, you're going to recognize them. I have an antivirus solution. Why do I need to invest in additional security? So the Microsoft play is to talk about next generation protection and EDR. More abbreviations which are going to bamboozle your customers. So I would personally stay clear of starting to throw out the abbreviations and make yourself look smart. You're just going to put your customer to sleep. What they want to know is why do I need to do it? So bring it back to a story. Everybody's familiar with the physical security. They don't leave their business at night and leave the door wide open. They lock it. So you are spending more money protecting your physical assets than you are your digital environment. People can log in unless you're putting security in place. But you need to sort of look at how we protect your digital stuff. you spend more effort protecting the laptop itself rather than what's on the laptop. It just seems crazy. You know, we are moving from the antivirus or a file coming down to malicious activity. If someone steals credentials, and that could be your user has put them into a phishing email, or they've reused those credentials. Now, who doesn't do that? And where they've used it on a third-party site has been breached, those credentials are used against you. It's the same as somebody sitting at your computer, logging in, looking for information, finding something of value, stealing it. If there's nothing of value, then they'll probably go the nuclear option and try and ransomware your machine and then charge you to get it all back. You also have the business owner who fancies himself as the security expert because he's always used this endpoint security. And I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but it is really around looking for malware. I've got my 5-minute hurry up. So 90% of attacks are now fileless. So if you're using traditional AV, it's only going to be effective 1 in 10 times. Those are not good odds. So, bring them on side and say, hey, look, you obviously know that, 90% of attacks are now fileless. Can I show you some stuff that we can do with Defender for Business? And happy to help you guys out with demos on that. How does Defender AV compare to other antiviruses? Can I really trust Microsoft with my security? So this slide, every vendor is going to wheel out some Gartner quadrants. What this really says is that it is a crowded marketplace. So Microsoft are competing against all these. And sure, don't take my word for it. Go out and check these. But what I would ask is that you look at the integration across the whole thing and the story. I think a better approach is to say, hey, look, it's not about antivirus. It's about modern protection or modernizing your security. And it's, those things were great when we had file-based attacks, when people downloaded malware. Now it's about stopping actual real-world threats. And how can you test against those? You can't. You can't put it in a lab and line up 30 security vendors and say, these are known attacks. How do you react to it? If you looked at those, yeah, sure, Microsoft just on the Defender on the endpoint, without going Defender for Business, catches. It's the same. It is generally top or equal. What is really interesting is the resource usage goes down because it's part of the OS. Really, all we're doing is connecting a sensor. Okay, sold on Defender for Business. Why should I pay more for Microsoft 365 Business Premium, which includes Defender for Business? No extra charge. And Microsoft's story is that you consolidate and you reduce what you're paying for all these different bits and pieces. So here is a great example of what you should be providing to your customers. I would challenge you and say that in New Zealand we don't. So that comparison, although it's in US dollars, of $45 against 22 is not realistic. In New Zealand, we don't do that sort of thing. We don't have all those capabilities built into it. And sure, you should be aiming towards Business Premium at the end of the story and moving all your customers to it because it includes all that. But a great way to start is securing those endpoints and starting them down that road to Business Premium. Next slide. Okay, what about Defender for Endpoint? So I keep on lapsing back to Defender for Endpoint, and what I'm talking about is P2. There is 3 different flavors of Defender for Endpoint. Now, if you like, Defender for Business, which is the subject of today's presentation, Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 and Plan 2. There's a list of features in there. The really only one to jump out is threat hunting and 6-month data retention, which is not available in Defender for Business. And the reason for that is Defender for Business is for small business where they're not going to be running queries across an environment to find threads of evidence that they can take back and find somebody that's culpable and track back where it was. What's important to a small business is that I need to be protected in the first case, and if something does happen, I need to be able to recover or mitigate that threat before it becomes widespread. So the story to tell around that is Defend for Business is built for small business. Defend for Endpoint P1, although it's cheap, the only case where I could recommend that is if you're using a endpoint managed solution AV, an AV that's not centralized. So if it's up to the end user to enable the security or turn it off, they will. If they want to download a file and they're not using centrally managed AV, they'll switch it off. So if they're using AV free or a home solution, they're just going to turn it off if it doesn't let them do what they want. So you need to centrally manage it, and that's where P1 comes into it. Defend for Endpoint Plan 2, sure, if you want to have those logs retained, but what you can also do is integrate into Sentinel or a SIEM and export those logs off. So you can store them within your Azure environment rather than doing that. So integration with SOCs, you can still do with Defender for Business. So if you have a third party that does that SOC managing for your high risk customers, then Defender for Business, the APIs are open and they can do that. Okay, this is the common one. I'm a small business, I haven't been attacked yet, and why would anybody attack me? This is the insurance sale, where we talk about 300% increase in ransomware. The average cost of breach, this means absolutely nothing to a customer. Customers will bury their heads in the sand. What we need to do is talk to them about why the threat landscape has changed. So you are not going to be targeted. You are just, the attackers are opportunistic. So, if you left the front door of your business open and someone wanders past with malicious intent, they're going to wander in and take stuff. They never targeted you. It's like if you got burgled, saying that someone, targeted me. It doesn't really happen, not to small business. If we look at, past history, and I keep on coming back to NotPetya and WannaCry, these were malicious exploits, using zero-day vulnerabilities against a particular accounting software that the Ukraine government mandated. But it didn't stop it spreading. It wasn't, confined. Other people used that software, and once it got in, it spread across the world, and we saw a lot of small businesses go down and not recover. They didn't make the headlines. Shaw, Maersk, and the large companies did because of the cost to them. Interesting thing was that you couldn't pay the ransomware. It didn't get your stuff back. So you need to be aware that you could be caught up as collateral. You don't have to be targeted anymore. And the risks are out there. Just look at history. So call to action to you guys, pretty much on my half hour, is start having that conversation and build it into your whole offering. Call your customers. Make a plan around it. If you're in sales, you know your customers, who, when, and how. We're going to provide a whole lot of collateral, and the next slide, I've got a whole lot of resources, both on the sales side and the technical side. They're going to dive into it a lot deeper than I can do in half an hour. And just listen to your customer, ask some questions that are going to uncover the opportunity. You can't sort of like just leap into it and say, tell me about how you're worried about security. Customers don't understand what the security is. They lock their door. So bring it back to them and sort of say, have you thought about, the risks? Have you heard about NotPetya or WannaCry? Those threats out there. There's also a lot of stuff happening which is not file based. If they turn around and say, hey, look, we don't have anything worth protecting, I would say, well, how do you invoice your customers? How do you know where your workforce has got to be next week? Those are all things of value. How would your business survive if you suddenly didn't have access to your computers and your systems? You experienced that from the COVID thing. We are going to send out a Defender for Business brochure, which highlights the Microsoft pitch on this. But I would say that security is not a 60-second pitch. It is an in-depth conversation and listening to your customers most of all. There are the 5 key reasons why to choose Microsoft for security and Defender for Business in this case. It is enterprise-grade security, and what we mean there is advanced threat protection. It is modernizing security for your endpoints. It's easy to use for you as a partner, easy to onboard, cost-effective. We're looking at, I think, $430 recommended retail. Correct me if I'm wrong, Zach.
$450, I think.
$450. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's going to be more than what your current AV is, but I would challenge you and say that, hey, look, you have a lot more opportunity for revenue to come in there. Doing your web filtering or your vulnerability management, all those bits and pieces that you can build an offering around and lower that cost to the customer if you wanted to. Top-rated security vendor, yep, and flexible licensing from there. Okay, here's a ton of resources, and we'll make this available, the deck and also the recording. At the moment, if you want to click on any of those links, they're live. I've also added Jaren's LinkedIn post at the bottom there on having that security conversation and why. And that is it from me. So we'll open up to questions, and I welcome anybody to challenge us on this. It's all about having a conversation. I'm not going to pretend that I know it all. So let's stop recording. If you've got any questions,
just before you do that, Paul, just
okay.
A reminder that we are running a promo on this for the month of June. So first 20 partners that get in and start selling some seats will be effectively crediting your cost up to the first 60 seats for those first 20 partners. So please get out there, talk to your customers about it, and yeah, there's a bit of money there on the table should you want to participate. And thank you all for attending as well. We really appreciate it.
Cool, thanks, Zach, and thanks for reminding me about the promo. So it's even better sale now. Okay, we'll stop recording.